A humble respect to Guru Mahan, Guru Piran Sivasankaran, Guru Piranyo, fellow Jnanis. Today I'm going to continue with the science of meditation, and I'm just going to recap a little bit and then speak about further steps on how we strengthen our meditational practice. Many people that start their meditational journey find it hard to stay focused. They will start a few months and then they find it very difficult to concentrate. So how do we help them? And so this is, as I said in the last three satsangs, many of us have gone through this early stage, and we have to, have patience, perseverance, persistence, and practice. This is really important to lead us to that Paranjoti state, the state of illumination, and the state of having full mastery of our mind. So what did we cover? So I covered the last class that how there are key factors that impact our mind. If our mind is not settled, if our mind is not at peace, it is hard for us to meditate. So most people have a turbulent mind. How do we get to the peaceful state? Only when the mind is peaceful, calm, sublime, that one can actually push to the next phase, which is the acquisition of jnana, acquisition of wisdom. Because when the mind is peaceful and calm, the mind can, go deeper. The ability to introspect, contemplate, reflect, and meditate becomes more and more easier. So one is able to acquire the jnana yoga, the ability to access that wisdom, knowledge, the relationship between the universe, the concept of God, the supreme, and the self. You'll start seeing that you become very curious of how the universe began, where the universe began. Does the universe have a beginning? And then this whole notion of God, the concept of God that began in the human mind, was reverberating the human mind, was articulated by the human mind, was written a lot by the great saints and sages about this concept of God. And then there was this deep reflection of, if God emerged from us, the concept of God emerged from us, there must be something within us that generated this God. So there's push from outside to the inner self. And then this concept of consciousness and self became the focus. And slowly, through this more peaceful, quiet mind, a sense of clarity comes, that you start seeing what may have been very different. The universe, the concept of God and self seem to be different, but slowly it starts converging. And you see that when the convergence starts taking place, you see that slowly you attain this thing called Purushottama Yoga, or that state of oneness with everything. So this is the ultimate state of self-realization that is written about by many great saints, as spoken about by Mahan and other scriptures. So again, how does one attain this state? And it starts with a peaceful mind. How do we generate that peaceful mind? But so one needs to understand why the mind is turbulent, and that is the root cause of the mind. So we covered in the last time key factors that actually we need to pay attention to, that prevents us from getting a more calm, peaceful, tranquil, and quietude mind. And I spoke about this. These are the human qualities that actually adversely impact our, ability to meditate, focus, and, practice that self-reflection. I spoke about vanity, arrogance, pretension, anger, cruelty, and ignorance at length in the last class. So these are qualities, that manifest in the human mind. Sometimes, it lurks very, very deep in the mind, somewhat like the cancer that sits quietly in our lymphatic systems, and slowly starts percolating and going to different places and damaging, pretty much, the our body. In that same way, we see that these qualities sometimes don't manifest explicitly, but it lurks and it starts seeping away in the human mind and eventually crippling the whole human mind. So we talked about this the last time. I want to continue with today another 6 more qualities. By knowing them, you understand them better. By understanding them, you then are able to master them, outlive them, outlast them, and eventually, remove them from your system. So what are the remaining one? The remaining one is impurity, contaminating the human mind. All human mind starts with purity. The child that is born, is pure in essence, innocent. But over time, with all the conditioning of the parents, the behavior of the parents, the words uttered by the parents, uttered by the people around them, the biases, and the injustices, you see that the children learn. And slowly, slowly, you see that, the surrounding, systems around them starts, contaminating the mind. But we don't teach the children how to manage it, how to expunge it. So in many scriptures, you see that children are sent to the gurus at a very early age to learn about the mastery of the human mind, so that whatever that comes into the mind, they know how to arrest it, they know how to treat it, and they know how to keep things that make the mind shrunken, dissolve it. So this whole notion of impurity, this notion of, harmfulness, damaging, destruction, not only to oneself, but also to other people, right? So you'll see later on that, the whole idea of, ego and, all these things, these qualities that I spoke about last time is the impurities in the human mind, right? And that prevents one to sit down and meditate, focus, and so on. So we see that how do we slowly, slowly remove this impurity. And later on, I'll speak about how one slowly understands this, treats it, and completely become liberated from it. So this impurity is, things such as harmfulness, harmful thoughts, harmful words, and harmful actions, right? Sometimes words can be quite harsh, but that's a reflection of what's happening in the mind. Same thing with actions. So always observe what is happening in the mind, and more importantly, what you're articulating. Always introspect, contemplate, reflect, and meditate upon what's happening in the mind before speaking. So this impurity is that mind that is continuously disturbed, and that impacts one's ability to sit down quietly and meditate. The next quality is actually why all this happens is that there is that absence of, search for knowledge. You see, one of the ways to master anything is to seek that knowledge. If you want to be a cardiologist, you've got to spend some time, having good high school scores in the various subjects. You have to do very well in your undergraduate or your degree, and then you go on for housemanship, and then you go on to do specialist training. It takes close to 20 to 25 years to be a very good cardiologist. So that requires a fair bit of training. But to master the human mind, one also needs to train the mind, because all the while they've been conditioned to engage with the world, sometimes without protection against the various things, turbulences of the human mind. So this is where the spiritual, religious, rational thinking, logical thinking, reasoning, training, and values are very important. This is why in many places they start at a very early age of training and teaching people this. Unfortunately, in the modern world, we have left all that aside. We've straight gone to, you see kids 3, 4 years old, they're sitting in front of the TV or a mobile phone and continuously bombarded by stimulation, material stimulation. So the brain also becomes so active. So when you stop it, the brain is unable to function. Whereas, in various the ancient times, people were taught about religion and spiritual discourses, trying to understand the universe, the concept of God, the concept of self. So we see that that's absent in the modern way of life. Although today, at the later stage, people are going back to yoga and spirituality and so on. So we see this, the absence of this, the mind doesn't have the anchor to hold on to that which is permanent, quiet. So the mind is always slipping away with all this material, worldly stimulation. So you see that I notice that whenever people find it hard to meditate, you see that their understanding, their training in religion, spirituality, rational thinking, reasoning is not very strong. They may be very ritualistic. They may be, doing a lot of prayers or meditating, but it's not deep. There's no deep introspection of it, reflection, and so on. So that is why you see over the many years, Mahan and other great saints, and including my own journey, that, simply sitting down for meditation, the early phase did not help. Only once I started going deeper and trying to understand that a sense of calm and sublimity and clarity came in, and meditation becomes much more easier. So this is why we couple in our satsangs, all the great teachings, the I God philosophy and many, many other scriptures. Mahan also has said, that these teachings are very important to help us discover that inner force within all of us. So when that's absent, the mind is like a sailboat without an anchor. So whenever waves come in, it gets bobbed around or pulled around. So the anchor is not there. So these teachings are an important anchor in the sea of turbulence. The other aspect is that when we don't have that strong, foundation of spiritual knowledge, we don't understand what is real and what is unreal, what is truthful and untruthful, right? What is permanent, what is impermanent, what is finite and what is infinite, what is mortal and what is immortal, right? So we're unable to sift what is real and unreal. So oftentimes we think that, all our material identity, our position, our titles, our bank accounts are what is giving us that, value, not knowing that all that also will slip, physical body and so on. So the human mind holds on to the material identity because it doesn't understand what is real, right? So the absence of truth, the ability, what we say, the ability to, have this viveka, the ability to sift out what is real and unreal. So when the mind anchors on that material reality, the material reality is changing. So does the mind. So the mind gets confused at times, right? But when the mind learns to learn about the self, understand about the self, understand about there is something in us that is much more powerful than the physical body, right? The mind starts getting more and more, anchored on this reality, which is more permanent, unchanging reality. So again, we see that when the mind does not understand what is real and unreal, the mind finds it hard to be quiet. It's chasing its own shadows. And oftentimes it gets tired and fed up. In the extreme cases, it becomes depressed. So we see that, that impurity, that ignorance, impurity are linked to the absence of intensive acquisition of knowledge and the truth. So these are all interrelated. When that happens, you see that, there is an absence of faith in the divinity, a power that is beyond our material reality. This notion of God, which is something supreme. We cannot, it's only a word. We are unable to experience it, because if God is the supreme power, then it must percolate everywhere in the universe, including myself. But I'm unable to experience it because the mind is so caught up in the material reality as opposed to the spiritual realm. So there is that, absence of faith in oneself, and they give up very, very easily. So again, we see that they are all interconnected. So when that happens, you see that the mind is grappling always for sensory pleasures and sensory desires and sensory things, that it tries to find joy and happiness, but sometimes in the wrong place, right? So you see that even those things will disappear, and you see that the wants and the desires become more and more. And sometimes it's uncontrollable. There becomes an addiction of this sensory galloping horse that is going fast and fast and fast, ultimately is uncontrollable. So we see that when that happens, the turbulence in the mind just keeps waves after waves and bigger waves, and you see that meditation becomes impossible, right? So we see that they're all interlinked with respect to, this the state of the human mind. And finally, you see that when we are unable to understand this reality because of the waves that we are riding, we become delusional, We believe the wrong things. We believe that, oh, okay, material things, being rich and being this and that is the most important thing. That's what gives me happiness. So there's this false belief or judgment of the world and the experiences. We think that is the greatest thing. So you see that, sometimes people say money is everything, materiality is everything. So they become delusional on what is real, right? And all that disappears when the body gets sick and the body is unable to cope with this material reality. So we see that, many people have these challenges that actually disrupts them from meditation. And because it's a kind of a reinforcing one another, your meditation is not very good. You can't focus. The turbulence become worse, and that feeds back, and you see that after a while they give it up, right? So we tell the disciples that go to, never mind, come for satsangs, attend this, read every day. It doesn't matter if you get the vibration or not. Sit down quietly, with a specific time, do your meditation, do your reading, go for your exercises, all those things. Continue to do it. One fine day, you start feeling the change. The micro level, most of this is micro level, and slowly, you see that, it starts reverberating stronger and stronger. Ultimately, it starts neutralizing all the waves of that material world in one fine day. Slowly, that quietude and happiness starts seeping, and your meditation improves. So we see that this 6 things that I covered today, of this impurity, the mind becomes impure. It means there's a lot of thoughts in there that makes the mind shrunken, and that's part of it, is because this absence of intensity of this religious, spiritual search for this knowledge. And one does not discover the truth. Eventually, they lose faith in themselves, unable to control, their sensories, and they become more and more delusional. They get a false understanding of who they are. So this is what we see in many early phase. People give up. even though they have been practicing, got the initiation from the guru, instructions have been given, this is what you need to do, they fall off the track. And after a while, it's hard for them to get back on track. So this is something that one needs to watch out for. That is why always being in the presence of great people, positive people, inspirational people, people who always say, okay, let's try this and let's try that. That is why I see many disciples spend time with gurus in the ashram, with people who are very positive, volunteer their time in many of these places, because they want to be able to be in that orbit of people who have that similar vibration. Hopefully, through the process of spiritual osmosis, the vibration also percolates in them, divine vibrations. So this is what we see that, another 6 qualities that prevents us from, deepening our meditation. I'll stop here.